FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska's 2nd District, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Spencer, for having me.
For starters, can you give us kind of a rundown of your district and why agriculture is important to it?
Well, I'm in District 2, which is headquartered out of Omaha and a lot of the suburbs, so it's a county and a half. By the way, the other two districts, some are 20 plus counties, the other one's 70 plus counties, so I have the smaller district. And it's more urban, suburban, but we do have farms on the west, south side of our district. But we have a lot of agribusiness, ConAgra, Gavilon, a lot of commodity stuff, Weston Foods, and a lot of our businesses benefit directly or indirectly from the agriculture community. Like 1 out of 4 jobs, in fact, are tied to agriculture in Nebraska, and the impact of that is surely felt in Omaha. As I explained to one of our constituents recently, we have a big budget deficit right now in the state because farm prices have gone down 45%. So in reality, we're all impacted by agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Now, Nebraska has 3 members of Congress and 2 senators, as every state does. But of those 5 people representing Nebraska in Washington, D.C., you're the only one that serves on an agriculture committee.
And I'm proud of it. I was raised on a farm, corn and soybeans, beef cattle. I understand, the families and the struggles they go through. I just wish I would have asked more questions when I was a teenager. Why are we doing this or that? But I understand the culture, and I love it. It's really a foundation part of our country. So I just say I'm very proud to be part of that. Fact is, a lot of people don't realize you take the 11 states from Nebraska all the way to the Pacific Ocean in the Northwest. I'm the only agriculture member in the House for all those states. So I got a lot of work to do, and I have to expand. I mean, I know corn, soybeans, and beef cattle, pork, but now I'm studying sugar beets, sorghum. There's a lot more to know.
There's a lot of representation from kind of the Midwest and from a lot of the production systems that Nebraska practices on the Ag Committee. Maybe not necessarily from that state, but from similar production areas.
Yeah, we've got Kansas, Iowa pretty well represented, Illinois.
So why is it important for Nebraska specifically?
Well, Nebraska, 1 out of every 2 rows of soybeans are exported. 1 out of every 4 rows of corn are exported. We're the leading exporter of beef. So 1 out of 4 jobs in Nebraska are tied to agriculture. I mean, it's our foundation of the economy is agriculture in Nebraska, and not just the direct farming of it. It's also the processing, the whole nose to tail part of what agriculture does. And in reality, we're all impacted by it. If you think about it, Americans spend less than 10% of their income on agriculture. That's the best in the whole world. And it's a tribute to the American farmers. They're the most efficient, productive farmers in the world. So we all have a vested interest in it. But Nebraska, it is the foundation of our economy.
Mm-hmm. So what do you hope to accomplish during your time on the House Agriculture Committee?
Well, the first thing I needed to do is really dig into the Farm Bill. I mean, I haven't been a part of this. Like I said, I left the farm at 21 to join the military, did that for 30 years. But we do need a Farm Bill. It's got to be affordable. We have to be part of a team in our country. So it can't just be all about the Farm Bill, but we have to do our part. We've already taken some cuts in previous years, though, so we want to make sure that agriculture doesn't take the unfair cuts this time. We've already taken them. I expect there'll be some modification there. I don't know what it's going to look like, though, in the end. But we need a Farm Bill. It has to be financially responsible. When I go around and talk to agriculture leaders, the crop insurance is, I think, the most fundamental, most important thing they want to make sure that we preserve. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some tweaks around the edges, but so I think that's something we got to make sure that we preserve. Farmers are counting on it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your military experience. You also serve on armed services and small business. Wondering how you see agriculture and really the interests of rural America reflected in the committee work that you do on those 2 other committees.
Well, the small business committee, I'm part of the subcommittee. I'm on the agribusiness. So we just had a lot of family farmers in last week. For example, and it was in the Small Business Committee, but was part of the subcommittee that looks at farming. So it was interesting to hear the challenges of what the small family farms are going through. So there are some interconnections there. On the, I'd say in the Armed Services Committee, there's some research areas that impact, I would say, agriculture. But in the end, trade and agriculture is very important in our economy. And if you don't have a strong economy, it's hard to have a strong military. So it all does connect together. I mean, frankly, the economy, if it's a strong economy, directly supports having a stronger military. So it all interconnects.
You mentioned your 30 years in the Air Force. I'm wondering, what did you learn throughout your time in the military that you think makes you a better member of Congress?
Well, I understand what happens when our military is not healthy. So I've had to go to 10 different people's homes, talk about the loss of their loved ones. I've had to bury over 12 people at Arlington, so I know the cost of war, and I think I know the cost of when we're not properly resourcing our military. I was just thinking about it today. It's funny you ask. There was 4 people who were killed in Afghanistan, and as I peeled that onion back, I was the investigating officer for it. A lot of it was because that unit was not resourced the way it should have been. It only had half the manpower it was supposed to have. So they had to borrow people from other units that weren't well trained. And this mishap with the air that killed 4 people, it was because they had people that weren't well trained. And it directly went back to not resourcing that unit the way it should have been resourced. We were trying to do it on a shoestring budget. So I think what I bring to Congress is someone who's been deployed 4 times. I understand what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. I understand the war on Islamic extremism. I think that's invaluable. I've studied Russia a good chunk of my career, for most of my career. I understand the challenges of deployed families and military, so I think I bring a real world experience. I think the thing that concerns me most about Congress, we have a lot of career politicians, and they're very good at what they do. Good at campaign speeches, fundraising. Really what Congress needs is people who have excelled as a businessman or woman, a farmer, military leader, teachers, nurses, doctors. We need people to bring in real world experience into Congress. It's the people's house. Well, I bring the real world military experience and the real world combat part of that, and I think we need that.
Mm-hmm. And you also previously worked for Jeff Fortenberry from Nebraska. What did you learn about Congress and about the legislative process, and really just what did you learn in general in your time working for the congressman?
So I helped work with him on military matters. Particularly, we have Offutt Air Force Base is right inside his district, right outside of our district. About half the people live in our district. But I enjoyed working with Congressman Fortenberry on the Offutt matters, the military Bellevue in that area. One of the things I took away from working with him, and I knew this because I interned for a congressman when I was 20 years old too, so I had a 30-year gap in there. But it's really important that our congressmen and women have a good ability to contact with their constituents. So one of my jobs was to make contact with 10 or 20 constituents a week in the part of the district that he wanted me to be working. And basically just say, say it's an owner of a clothing store. I'd come in and make an appointment for 15 minutes and ask them, hey, I work for Jeff Fortenberry. What are the top issues that concern you, and how can he help you out? And I did 10 to 20 of those a week if I could, on top of advising them on Offutt and military stuff. And I think it was a reaffirmation to me that we have to make sure that our elected officials are getting a wide breadth of input from constituents. It's really easy to talk to people that only agree with you, but you got to reach out and find. And some people aren't even very politically attuned. You got to get to them too. What's your number one concern? So that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. And when you were running for Congress, your predecessor was also on the House Agriculture Committee, albeit serving as a Democrat. And when you were running for Congress, and obviously the 2016 election was historic for a number of reasons. Put a Republican in the White House, put a few, changed some margins up on Capitol Hill. But in all of that craziness, you were the only Republican to defeat a Democratic incumbent in the House. So I'm wondering, what did your constituents send in you see in you that sent you to Washington, D.C.?
I think first of all, my opponent was an honorable man, so I'm not here to knock him. But I think there's 2 parts to this. Concerning me, I was not a career politician. I think people liked the fact that there was a military experienced person that we were sending, someone that's commanded 8,000 people, 7,000 people, that understands missile defense, understands what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think folks like that experience. My message was that we need to get our military back on its feet, that regulations and government red tape were hurting our small business community, and we needed to work on that. I did run on repealing and replacing health care, which is obviously a very fresh topic right now. I think a big part too is how do we help our small businesses and our business community compete fairly in the world? When you hear that we tax our businesses at a much higher rate than they do in Europe or Canada, it's no wonder why our economy is growing at barely 1%. So I wanted to be a voice for helping our economy compete on level playing ground. So that was my message. I think on the other end of it, and like I said, my opponent was he's a nice gentleman, but I think Nancy Pelosi and President Obama, the liberal policies of more centralization of government, more spending, the federal debt, was not well received in our district as well. So I think you had to look at both ends of that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest, single, most important issue to the people of the 2nd District in Washington?
Well, I think right now, I believe it's probably a mixture of two things. It goes back and forth. With the data I saw early on, it was national security, and that was like a year ago. Fear of terrorism coming in from the Middle East. You would hear that the most. I think the other part of it, though, right around election time, was healthcare, because Nebraska's insurance rates went up 51%. That's huge. And so folks who are self-employed or have to buy their own insurance right now, they're paying $20,000 a year, $10,000 deductibles. So if you're in that 15% niche, that's your number one issue, right? Farmers are saying that's one of their top issues. I think, but if I had to probably put it down to one issue, it's really, we got to get our economy growing faster than the 1%, 1.5%. We need to get it at 3%. We have stagnant wages right now, and there's a demand to hire more people, but there's also a lot of business, like I say, they can't find people who want to even work in their companies right now. So I think there's just some economic concerns. We're not growing, and people are having a hard time finding folks to grow. And so I think we got to get our economy moving at about 3% clip, and we have to help people get back into the workforce. Because right now we have about 90 million plus folks who are just left the workforce.
Mm-hmm. And I'll wrap up with this one. You've been up on Capitol Hill for a couple of months now. In these early months of the 115th Congress and your time here in Washington, what has surprised you most about Congress?
Well, one of the things, I wear a Fitbit and I get 12,000 paces in a day.
Really?
So it helps you get in shape walking wise. I think another thing that impresses me, every 30 minutes to an hour, you could go from one thing to totally something else. So I could be talking to King Abdullah, or Prime Minister al-Abadi from from Iraq, and then you're talking about pesticides, or you're talking about inheritance tax. So I like it because every 30 minutes to an hour, you get something really totally different thrown at you, and you have to study it. And so I really enjoy the breadth of stuff that we get to work on. I would say I haven't been totally overly surprised. The pace is what I expected. It's living up to that. I think we work with people that are really working hard and trying. I think that sometimes there's a cynicism back home, but the people I work with, I really see a heart for trying to do the right thing. I mean, I see people with tears in their eyes, and fellow elected officials, some of them have been here 10, 16 years. You see the heart and passion that comes out of it. And I think sometimes if you haven't been around that, it's really to have a more cynical attitude there. So I've appreciated the people on both sides of the aisle, that you see the heart and the desire to do well.
Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska's 2nd District, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.